In the Battle of Metz, I made a mistake in insisting upon a direct assault instead of bypassing it. These are George Patton's words from his posthumously published memoir, War as I Knew It. Patton was a man of action, not apologies. But in the quiet moments after the guns fell silent, the ghosts of the Moselle River seemed to find him. In his memoirs, published only after his sudden death, he left behind an admission that reads like a confession. The man who believed war was won through speed and aggression was admitting he had thrown men at concrete walls for 3 months. The general who preached bypass and encirclement had ordered frontal assaults against one of the most fortified cities in Europe. Metz stands as one of Patton's most costly tactical decisions of World War II. Between September and December 1944, his Third Army lost over 55,000 casualties during the Lorraine campaign. The grinding offensive to capture eastern France and cross into Germany. The city of Metz itself became the focal point of this bloody stalemate. It was the kind of World War I meat grinder Patton had spent his entire career trying to avoid. This wasn't just bad luck or impossible circumstances. Patton made choices that cost American lives. He allowed subordinates to continue attacks that weren't working. He prioritized capturing forts over preserving his army's offensive capability. The question wasn't whether Metz could be taken. The question was whether taking it was worth the cost. And Patton's own memoir, written after the war, gives the answer. By September 1st, 1944, Patton's Third Army had advanced 400 miles in 2 weeks. They had liberated most of France. They were approaching the German border. For 2 weeks, the Third Army was a lightning bolt. Then the sky went dark. Eisenhower redirected fuel supplies north to support Montgomery's Operation Market Garden. On August 31st, Patton requested 400,000 gallons. He received 31,000. Third Army's tanks stopped moving. Imagine being a tank commander who can see the German border through his binoculars only to hear his engine sputter and die because the gas was gone. It wasn't just a logistical delay, it was a soul-crushing loss of momentum. Patton's entire operational philosophy depended on mobility. Keep moving, bypass strong points, exploit breakthroughs before the enemy can react. Without fuel, that philosophy was worthless. By September 15th, Third Army was effectively immobilized. Patton's division sat in eastern France with empty gas tanks. The rapid advance that had terrified German commanders was over, and the fuel that could have kept them moving was going north to Montgomery for an operation Patton knew would fail. Eisenhower's decision forced Patton into exactly the kind of warfare he was worst at. Static positions, methodical advances, siege tactics. The racehorse was trapped in a corral. Metz wasn't just a city. It was one of the most heavily fortified positions in the world. 43 interconnected forts surrounded the city in concentric rings. The Germans had built these fortifications after annexing the region in 1871. The most formidable positions, the Festin, like Fort Driant, were constructed between 1899 and 1914. They were designed to withstand the heaviest modern artillery. Massive concrete walls, underground tunnels, retractable armored gun turrets, interlocking fields of fire. Fort Driant was the crown jewel of this system. Its walls were 20 feet thick. Its gun turrets could disappear underground after firing. Tunnels connected it to other forts in the network. American soldiers described hearing the clunk hiss of armored turrets rising from the earth like monsters, firing a volley, and vanishing before a single shell could respond. You weren't fighting men, you were fighting the ground itself. American intelligence underestimated the fortress system catastrophically. They believed the forts were obsolete relics from World War I that would surrender once surrounded. They were wrong about everything. The forts were fully manned by experienced German troops. They had adequate ammunition and supplies. They were connected by underground communications that American artillery couldn't touch. October 1944 brought the worst weather anyone in the region had seen in 20 years. Rain fell constantly. The Moselle River flooded its banks. Eastern France turned into a swamp. Fields became mud pits. Roads became streams. The terrain that favored armor in summer became impossible for tanks in autumn. Patton's doctrine depended on tanks operating off-road. Armored divisions would bypass strongpoints through open country. Infantry would hold roads while armor exploited gaps. In the mud, none of that worked. The mud wasn't just an obstacle. It was a thief. It stole boots off men's feet, jammed their rifles, and rotted their skin. Tanks couldn't leave the roads. Infantry advanced through knee-deep water. This wasn't the glorious, fast-moving war Patton promised. This was a wet, shivering hell, where men died in holes filled with icy water, miles from a dry bed. The weather took away Patton's advantages and amplified German defensive strengths. The fortress system became even more effective when attackers had to approach unpredictable routes through mud. General Walton Walker commanded 20th Corps under Patton. He was aggressive, confident, and convinced he could take Metz by a direct assault. On October 3rd, he launched his attack on Fort Driant. The 5th Infantry Division attacked uphill through mud against concrete fortifications. German artillery from multiple forts concentrated on the American advance. Casualties were immediate and heavy. Walker's troops reached Fort Driant's outer walls but found them impenetrable. A GI would crawl through 300 yards of open fire just to reach a concrete wall he couldn't scratch. They threw grenades at 20-foot reinforced bunkers only to watch them bounce back like toys. TNT, satchel charges, even direct artillery fire just scorched the concrete without leaving a dent. It takes a special kind of courage to get up and do that again the next morning. American soldiers discovered the hard way that Fort Driant was designed to withstand heavy bombardment. The Germans built it to resist French and German artillery from World War I. American guns in 1944 weren't significantly more powerful. Walker requested more troops. He requested more artillery. He requested combat engineers with specialized explosives. He got them. The attacks continued. Patton watched Walker's attacks fail repeatedly through October. He received casualty reports showing divisions being ground down. He knew the attacks weren't working. His standard doctrine was clear. Bypass strongpoints. Don't attack fortifications directly. Keep moving and let the enemy worry about their flanks. Metz was exactly the kind of target Patton normally avoided. But Patton authorized Walker to continue the assaults. He reinforced 20th Corps. He committed the 95th Infantry Division to the battle. He ordered attacks to continue despite mounting casualties. Patton's frustration at being stopped was driving his decisions. The man who hated World War I had accidentally recreated its worst horrors. He had been racing across France. He had been 100 miles from the German border. Now he was trapped, watching his army bleed for a single city while Montgomery wasted fuel in Holland. The fuel situation meant he couldn't bypass Metz and keep advancing. He didn't have supplies to maintain an offensive deeper into Germany, so he decided to take Metz as a stepping stone. He viewed capturing the city as necessary for the eventual Czar campaign once logistics improved. October became a nightmare. The 5th Infantry Division lost 4,000 men. The 95th Infantry Division suffered similar losses. These weren't divisions being destroyed in dramatic battles. They were being worn down through attrition, one bloody assault at a time. Fort Driant remained untaken. American troops penetrated the outer works multiple times, but couldn't hold their positions. German counterattacks using underground tunnels pushed them back. Walker kept ordering attacks. Division commanders kept sending troops forward. Battalion commanders watched their companies get shredded. Men they had trained with, bled with, fought beside for months, were disappearing into the mud and concrete. The tactical situation never fundamentally changed. Patton could have bypassed Metz, contained it with minimal forces, and continued advancing. This was his standard doctrine, and it had worked everywhere else. But several factors made him continue the direct assault. First, he genuinely believed the city would fall quickly. Intelligence reports kept suggesting the defenses were weaker than they appeared. Second, Metz controlled critical railway infrastructure. Third Army needed for deep operations into Germany. The truck-based Red Ball Express was failing. Patton needed the rail hub inside Metz. Leaving it in German hands meant no sustainable advance. Third, and most important, Patton had no fuel to advance further anyway. Eisenhower had diverted supplies to Montgomery. Third Army was stuck whether Patton attacked Metz or not. So Patton decided to take the city while waiting for logistics to improve. The flaw was assuming Metz could be taken without prohibitive casualties. By November, the situation changed. Third Army received more ammunition and supplies. Air support became available. Most importantly, combat engineers arrived with specialized equipment for attacking fortifications. On November 9th, Patton launched a major offensive across the entire 20th Corps front. Multiple divisions attacked simultaneously. German defenders, who had held for 2 months, finally began to crack under sustained pressure. Fort Driant, the fortress that had resisted since October, finally surrendered on December 8th after being bypassed and contained. The fortress fell when its garrison could no longer hold out. Metz surrendered on November 22nd. The remaining forts fell throughout December, with Fort Jeanne d'Arc, the last holdout, surrendering on December 13th. The fortress system that had protected the city for 70 years was finally neutralized. Third Army had won. The question was whether the victory justified the cost. Third Army suffered 55,182 combat casualties between September and December 1944 during the Lorraine campaign. These included 6,657 killed, 36,406 wounded, and 12,119 missing. Non-battle casualties from trench foot and exhaustion nearly equaled combat losses in some units during the worst of the November mud. The 5th Infantry Division lost nearly 40% of its strength. The 95th Infantry Division was similarly depleted. To a general, that's a number on a ledger. But to the men on the line, it's a catastrophe. It means that by the time Metz fell, nearly every second man you had shared a cigarette with in Normandy was either dead, maimed, or shivering in a hospital bed with trench foot. Both divisions required extensive replacements and retraining before they could resume offensive operations. These weren't acceptable losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. These were casualties suffered taking a city that military logic suggested should have been bypassed. Metz offered no strategic advantage that justified the cost. Third Army's offensive capability was significantly reduced. The racehorse had finally won, but Patton had ridden his mounts into the ground to do it. Divisions that could have been attacking into Germany spent 3 months battering concrete walls. Patton's aggressive doctrine normally minimized casualties by avoiding strong points and maintaining momentum. At Metz, abandoning that doctrine led to precisely the kind of attrition warfare he had always opposed. In his posthumously published memoir, War as I Knew It, Patton wrote that in the Battle of Metz, he made a mistake in insisting upon a direct assault instead of bypassing it. He recognized that Walker should have been given different orders. He acknowledged the casualties were excessive for what the battle accomplished. This admission matters because Patton rarely acknowledged tactical errors publicly. He was confident, sometimes arrogant, about his decisions. His post-war reflection on Metz revealed he understood what the battle represented. Metz was the campaign where everything that made Patton effective was taken away. No fuel meant no mobility. Bad weather meant tanks couldn't maneuver. The fortress system meant his aggressive doctrine didn't work. But Patton's error wasn't just bad luck. He chose to continue attacks that weren't succeeding. He allowed Walker to repeat failed tactics. He prioritized capturing forts over preserving his army's strength. The circumstances were difficult. The decisions made them worse.